Hello and welcome back, dear listeners, to the podcast series that examines why nuclear energy is not clean or green. Our question and answer segment today focuses on Chernobyl. Links to our previous talks in this series will be listed for you in the show notes below. I'm your host, Helena Kaufman, and it's my pleasure to introduce our guest, Dr. Moondust. In addition to being the founder and primary biochemist at Moondust Cosmetics, Dr. Moondust is a cancer biologist, so we look forward to her perspectives. Welcome to today's podcast, Dr. Moondust.
Thank you, Helena. Hello.
Hello. So, Dr. Moondust, we continue today to learn more about the potential health hazards of nuclear energy and why it's not clean or green. Our discussion today is based on one of your books. It's entitled A New Approach to Cancer Risk Assessment. Is that correct?
That's right, Helena. Nuclear energy from fission is not clean or green because it inevitably produces some radioactive waste. Exposure to this radioactive material can cause cancer and other long-term diseases in humans and negatively impacts plants and other animals.
Now, in this case, are we just talking about last generation or next generation nuclear reactors as well, which are being hailed as safe since people are wary of nuclear power plants after the accidents?
Well, Helena, we're talking about both because nuclear scientists have not been able to eliminate the radioactive waste that is generated during the nuclear fission process completely. It's a necessary byproduct of the reaction. It doesn't matter whether the reactor is large or small.
Oh dear, that's not good. Like, we're being misled to believe they are fine.
You see, the problem is that nuclear scientists are not really familiar with biology, and they have a very poor track record for predicting the biological effects of radiation on humans.
So, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure, you see, these nuclear scientists make predictions about radiation according to the mutational theory of carcinogenesis, which predicts a very low incidence of resulting cancers, since mutation is a pretty slow process. However, the actual cancer incidence from radiation exposure is in fact much higher. Moreover, it can be explained by the apoptotic model of carcinogenesis that I work with, because many radioactive heavy metals like uranium and plutonium cause cell death.
Oh, I see. So really, there's some misinformation circulating here.
Exactly. They say the cancer incidence near a nuclear facility should be something, but it's actually something else. So they simply ignore the statistics. So let's start with the example of Chernobyl, which has given us a lot of data and insight into this whole problem. On April 26, 1986, the most serious accident in the history of the nuclear industry occurred at Chernobyl that led to a huge release of radioactive materials into the environment, including radioactive iodine isotopes. A radioactive cloud spread over much of Europe, and highly sensitive monitoring systems developed for the detection of fallout from nuclear weapons were able to register minute amounts of Chernobyl dust even in remote regions of the world.
Oh, yes, I remember when that happened. In fact, that week I was chatting online with a friend who told me that he was on the lake at Chernobyl at the very time with his team training for a sports competition. He said he saw military trucks rolling by in the countryside, and he told me that all the Geiger counters were removed from all the schools and labs in the region so that no one could really accurately gauge the conditions in the atmosphere. He then told me that his family boarded trains as soon as they could to stay with his grandmother far away from the Chernobyl area. And he later told me that government dispensed vodka freely out of the backs of trucks to the population. And when they ran out of vodka, it was any wine or alcohol they could distribute it. Plus, the streets were being washed down 2 times a day with water.
Wow, that's quite a story. Actually, I was an undergraduate studying at the University of London at the time, and it was pretty scary because nobody knew what to expect. Firstly, as time passed, there were many harmful radiation effects on the plants and animals living within 20 to 30 kilometers of the Chernobyl power plant, known as the exclusion zone. There was an increase in mortality of coniferous plants, soil invertebrates, and mammals, and a decrease in reproduction for plants and animals. Then, in human populations, there has been, and still is, a notable increase in childhood thyroid cancer in Belarus and Ukraine as a result of radioactive iodine exposure from Chernobyl, which is baffling nuclear scientists. There has also been a substantial increase in thyroid cancer among those who were exposed to the radioactive iodine fallout from Chernobyl as children. Now, what do we already know about radioactive iodine exposure? Well, epidemiological data comes from the testing of early nuclear weapons, which released radiation including radioiodines, iodine-131 and iodine-129. Papillary thyroid carcinomas were found to be far more frequent at autopsy in World War II Hiroshima and Nagasaki atom bomb survivors at 17.9% than in persons not exposed to atomic radiation at only 1 to 4%. Detonation of a megaton thermonuclear device in the Bikini and Marshall Islands in 1954 resulted in the deposition of radioactive fallout, including various radioiodines, and was associated with thyroid nodules and thyroid cancer in exposed islanders. Similarly, an excess of thyroid neoplasms was associated with individuals exposed to radioiodines generated by nuclear detonations at the Nevada test site in the 1950s. Moreover, gamma radiation emitted by radioiodines has been reported to stimulate apoptosis in certain cell types, including rat thymocytes, mice myeloid cells, and in human lymphoid cells. And of course, apoptosis is cell death.
Wow, that's a lot of detail to take in. But I'm hearing you say that kids born in the region today are still getting thyroid cancer from the Chernobyl accident, which happened so long ago. And it could be happening in other places where nuclear testing was carried out. How?
Well, iodine-131 decays pretty quickly in 8 days, but the radioisotope iodine-129 has a half-life of 15.7 million years. Therefore, the present-day elevation of childhood thyroid cancer around Chernobyl could be due to the gamma radiation generated by the iodine-129. In fact, initial detection of I-129 has already been reported in the contaminated areas of Chernobyl.
So that's due to an accident at a nuclear facility or nuclear testing site. That's a long time ago. Surely this doesn't apply to the regularly functioning nuclear power plants now?
Actually, the energy released at a nuclear power plant as a result of fire or an explosion due to sabotage could be comparable to an atomic bomb. So there has to be extreme security, and it could fail or be hacked, especially with modern computerization techniques controlling things.
I guess I'm looking for reassurance here. So I see your point, but what about the new nuclear reactors we're hearing so much about?
Well, we may be in an even worse situation with them, as we learned in our last discussion about Sellafield, a nuclear reprocessing facility that attempts to decontaminate fuel from Europe's nuclear reactors. It is likely to be dealing with next generation nuclear reactors too.
So, in closing, I wonder, is there anything we can do as citizens to better the situation? I mean, what kind of conversations should we be having? Perhaps with our politicians?
We should be investing in truly green energy sources, Helena, and possibly peacefully opposing the installation of new nuclear fission power plants.
That's certainly something to put on our personal agenda for our self-preservation. So, thank you so much, Dr. Mundus, for the insights you've shared today. I'm sure there will be more in the future to help us understand the situation and what it is that we can do. I'd like for our readers and viewers to know that the climate action list and the 11 points of action that we can take in our daily lives, we'll share the link to that to hear the first podcast in this series in the show notes below. I also wanted to add that you'll find this series and text blogs on the moondustcosmetics.com website, where they appear along with other lifestyle, skincare, and sun care information you can use as you work, play, or travel in our environment. See you next time, and thanks for tuning in.